Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Art 192, Photoshop/digital imaging for the fall 2021 semester. Today, I'll be working on lesson 6 from our textbook, which the focus of this assignment, or I think the most important part of this lesson rather, has to do with layer masks. So we'll talk about what you're looking at in a moment. Before we get into the lesson itself, though, I want to make sure that everybody is completing their lessons. I haven't looked at them all just yet. Remember, you don't get a grade for your lessons until the end of the semester, but you should be working on either the postcard assignment or the variation of it that I just talked about that I don't have in writing, which is to do the selfie photobomb assignment. And I have lots of examples of that on my website. So you need to get started with that. And if you have questions about that, let me know. Regarding working on lesson 6, I have not forgotten about lesson 5, which involves quick fixes using Photoshop. I will come back to that after this. But I felt in order to do your first assignment, this was more important. So I'm just going out of order just a little bit, and that's all. So let's go ahead and take a look at the before and after images. We have, in our before, we have a photograph of a very nice lady here wearing glasses. And if we turn off her layer, you can see beneath it, we have this little digitized kind of large pixeled background. And so what we want to do is isolate her from the background, her background, so that we can see this pixelized background. That's the first thing that we need to do. The second thing that we're going to do is that you can see that in the final version, her head is tilted back a little bit. So there is a tool that we can use called Puppet Warp that will enable us to do that quite easily. Once we have tilted her head back, then what we'll do is we're going to colorize her glasses. So you can see in the original, we have a tortoiseshell frame. It's kind of tan brown, and we've changed it to green. So we have to isolate the image, and then we use a colorize feature in order to do that. And then the last thing that we do is we're going to create a shadow, a cast shadow, not a drop shadow, but a cast shadow from the silhouette of her image. So all of those shouldn't really take us that long to do. They have made significant improvements in recent years in Photoshop. And there are subtle little changes, but they're really important changes and enabling us to quickly take an image, a figure, and to isolate her. Now, the important part of this that you'll notice in their final version, you'll look behind her head here. And you see these subtle little strands of hair, that little frizzies that stick out. We want to keep those. And you'll notice in their version, they cut them off. And there's a couple of little subtle strands along the top and here that we want to keep. Okay, it's those subtle little changes, or those subtle little, I don't know what you want to call them, details that really enhance our image to make it look seamless with the image that we're combining it with. Because if you trim away too many of those things, it looks artificial and it looks like it's been cut out with a pair of scissors, you know, from a magazine or something. And so they have improved this tool considerably over the years. So I'm going to do this and probably do it a little bit differently than the textbook. If you have the current version of the textbook, the 2021 version, it's really not that different. Something that you want to, actually, none of the lessons are that different. They haven't really made major changes to Photoshop in some time. So To begin the process, what we're going to do is I'm going to make a copy of her layer, just so that in case I need to go back to the original, I can. I like doing that, since that's the one that we're going to modify. And then I'm going to come up here, and what I want to do is I'm going to use the object selection tool. This is a relatively new addition that is to Photoshop. Before that, the quick selection tool was a big change, but I'm going to use the object selection tool. And what I want to do is I want to click and drag around her. And you can see in an instant, it detects the difference between her and the background. Now, if the background were a similar color to her, it might be a little bit different or difficult to do. But because it's a light blue, background versus the warm tones of her skin and hair, it makes for an easy selection. But we want to refine it a little bit further, because you can see that some of the strands of her hair are missing, and the same along the back of her head and along the top, and the little hobnob or bun on her head. So to enhance this a little further, what we're going to do is what we want to do along the top here is the select, where it says select and mask. So I click that, and it gives us some options. The default one that I have selected here, which may not be your default, is that what we're able to do is click here, and we can see what the background layer is. You'll notice that there's a variety of other options here. We can click here, so that goes back to the original image. That really doesn't help us. We have here where we can see what the mask is using, and we can click back and forth as we are working on it. And if whichever one works best for us, you're not restricted to any one. Okay, well, I like this one. I like seeing what it's going to look like after I'm done editing it. So that's the first thing that we want to do. The next thing that we want to do is if you plan on using these settings, again, you want to make sure that you remember them. So you can click that little checkbox. We have a new option here that under refine mode, you can go to color aware or object aware. Color aware maybe probably is the most important right now, but we could go back and forth and see if there's a difference between that. Okay, to go back to object versus color aware. Edge detection by default is set to 0 pixels. We can also click on smart radius. And I'm going to go ahead and increase this a little bit, and you'll notice that it actually, notice how it's adding some of these little subtle little hairs that I was talking about. You don't want, to do too much, but I am going to crank it up a bit. I was doing this just a little while ago. And you can see that some of the background is still locked into the selection, but we can get rid of that in a heartbeat. The rest of this is a pretty clean selection overall. The only thing that we want to get rid of is some of the background here at the base of her neck back here. And it's already done a pretty good job of leaving the subtle little strands of hair behind her head. And there's a couple of little strands along the top here and the hobnob. So not too many versions of Photoshop ago, you had to fiddle with this quite a bit in order to get that, that look. But right now it's doing it automatically for all of us. It's really good, not only for isolating people, especially, even people with short haircuts and cropped hair and that sort of thing generally have little soft frizzy ends to the hair that you want to keep and maintain, to make that when you're combining it with other images, that you want to make sure that you keep those details intact. And these are the tools to do that. So there's another tool that they have developed that's relatively new. And you'll notice at the top here, it says refine hair. So it knows that we're using an image of a person. We want to refine the hair. As soon as I click that, notice that those little areas went away. Just with a couple of clicks of the mouse, boom, we are good to go. The next thing that we want to do down here at the bottom, and I find that this is really important, is that we want to click here where it says Decontaminate Colors. What that does is it looks at the surrounding image and it will remove any of the colors that are different than her to make sure that we get a really clean selection. So this is what, whether you do the postcard or the selfie photo bomb, you will probably be using this tool a lot. I find it to be probably one of the most important lessons in the book. It's extremely, extremely useful, and I use it all the time. The last thing that we want to do is that when we click OK, we want to make sure that we output this to a new layer with a layer mask. You don't have to do that. You can just select a new layer with no mask, but I like keeping the mask because I can always go back in and edit it. It's not a permanent change. So I'll go ahead and I'll click OK. And you can see that the one that I had below here, if I turn this one off, okay, it just made a copy of that. So actually I can take the model copy that I had and I can toss it. I can throw that away and turn this one back on. So the next thing that we want to do here, let's go ahead and let's bend her neck back, and then we will color her glasses. So we're moving at a pretty good clip here. In order to use the puppet warp tool, though, you cannot use a layer mask. That doesn't work for us. So what I need to do is I need to collapse it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to make a copy of it. And I'll turn this one off. And now I'm going to throw the mask away. Put the mask in the trash. And when I do, it's going to ask me, apply mask to layer before removing, or yes or no. Now, if you want to return the image back to its original condition, its original state, I should say, just say delete. But I want to apply it. So now you can see we no longer have the layer mask, but I have a copy of it in case I want to go back to it and edit it. And now I can take this layer and I can it'll allow me to use Puppet Warp. So to use Puppet Warp, make sure that I have her layer selected. And I go to Edit. And it will be right here. We have Content Aware Scale. And it's right beneath that, it's Puppet Warp, and there is no key command for that. And you'll see what it does is it breaks up the image into all these little polys. Well, what you need to do, if you've never used Puppet Warp before, is we need to come over the perimeter of this, and we need to click. And what these do, are the icon are like little push pins. And so what they do is they actually fix it, because if I come over here and I move this, notice that everything kind of stretches and distorts. I don't want that. I want to leave certain parts of this intact and allowing me to go ahead and fix part of it and bend her neck back, but leave the rest of this intact. So I'm clicking here, probably putting more of these than I really need. And now what I can do, that I have this bottom half fixed, I can click on this one. And then when I hold down the Option key, notice that there's a little ring around the outside. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see that. When I hold down the Option key, there's a little ring that appears around that particular little push pin. And the cursor changes to a curved double arrow. And now when I click and I drag, notice that I can pull her neck back, and it keeps all the bottom part here, these push pins here, keep the bottom part intact. So if I'm happy with it, fine. If not, cancel it. If you don't like any of it, you can always go back to the layer that we saved. I like what I see. I'm going to click OK. And let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit so we can see what we're doing here. So before I create the drop shadow, this lesson is not going to take us very long, and yet I find it to be probably one of the most important ones. What I want to do is I want to isolate her glasses. And if I want to, I could put them on a separate layer. It wouldn't hurt. Or at least create a new layer and colorize that new layer so that if I ever want to return to the original colors of the glasses, I can. So let me zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to try it a couple of different ways. I'm going to go ahead and first make a selection of her glasses. So I'll do that, and I'm going to use the object selection tool again. But instead of clicking around all of her, I'm just going to select around the glasses. And that's it. And you can see it does a pretty darn good job, but in here, the actual lens is part of that selection that we need to remove. So the rest looks good, but now what I need to do, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch from the object selection to the quick selection tool. And then I'm going to hit the left bracket key. It's the one to the, just to the right of the P key to reduce the size of the brush. And I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key, depending on which platform you're using. And I can click in here. And I can drag it along. And hopefully, if I make it small enough, I might need to refine it a little bit. I'm going to get rid of that part of the selection here. So this probably will take longer than the rest of it. Now, if I need to add some of it back, I can do that. And again, I can use maybe the lasso tool if I want. Remember, if I can add it, I can go ahead and I can hold down the Shift key to click and drag in here and add that back into the selection. If that's important, I can click here and add that back into the selection. Maybe I need to zoom in a little bit more to refine this. So here I need to add that back in. I want that to be part of the selection. So I'm going to click and drag in here. Whoa, I didn't want to do that. Let me zoom out of this. Whoa, I don't know what I did here. Okay, so now I kind of went overboard. I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Option key. And I'm going to remove this from the selection key, the selection. And I'm going to go back again, hold down the Shift key. And with the clicking on the left mouse, click and drag and add that to our selection. Okay. Now what I want to do is zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to give this a whirl here. I'm going to try to colorize this. There's a couple of different ways we can do this. What I'm going to do though, let's see, I can add some of this here too while I'm thinking about it. Let's go ahead and hold down the Shift key. I'm going to add some of this to our selection right in here. There we go. Okay. So if I want to work on the same layer, the tool that I would want to use is it's underneath, where are we here? Underneath the spot healing brush. And it's the, no, it's not. My mistake, my bad. It is underneath the brush tool. It's the color replacement tool. So what I can do is make sure that I have the foreground color that I want selected. So I'll click here. Instead of black, I can do that, or I can come over here and we can select kind of a dark green. And now what I can do is I can increase the size of my brush with the color replacement. Where is it? There we go. I want the color replacement tool. And as I paint in here, notice how it kind of magically changes the color of her glasses for us. So that's pretty easy to do. As long as you hold down the mouse, you can do one undo, and that's it. Now, another way that we can work, as I said, what that does is that changes that layer. So what I would prefer to do is add another layer on top of that. And what I want to do is change the mode of that layer from normal, go all the way down to the bottom here, and I'm going to change color. So all we're doing is we're changing the color. Now I have this green selected again, and I can paint on top here. Let's see if it will change. No, it's not working for me. So I have color, contiguous color mode. Why aren't you working for me? Should be working. I lied. There's something that I'm doing wrong here, unless they've changed it. Hold on a second. I'm going to go ahead and pause my recording. Yeah, I'm not paying attention. I still have the color replacement tool. That's not the color, the tool that I want. I simply want a brush. Okay. Now, if I increase the size of the brush and I begin to paint, notice it's like painting a wall, that it covers up everything. Even if I change the opacity of it, if you paint enough times on top of it, the whole area will gradually become opaque. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch again, from normal to color. And I leave the green foreground and I have my paintbrush tool. And now when I paint, notice that it's doing the same as what the color replacement tool did. I'm happy with that. Also, if you want to save the selection, if it takes you a while to actually create a selection, you may want to save it. They don't really talk about it that much anymore. But what I can do is go to select at the very top, and I can say save selection, and I'll name it, and I'll name it glasses. So if I ever want to bring this selection up again, I can. Once I deselect it, it's going to be, I would have to normally bring that, create that selection from scratch again. But if I go to channels, you'll see that I have a brand new channel here, which is our mask that we saved for the glasses. If I want to bring it up, hold down the Command key, click on that, and notice how the selection comes back up. That's all there is to it. So I've changed the color of her glasses, but notice what I've done. Let me zoom out of here. I've put them on a separate layer so that when I go back to layers, if I choose if I wanted to bring her glasses back to their original color, all I have to do is turn that layer off. So this would be my preferred way of working. Again, I like working in non-destructive ways. So if I need to, or I decide, or the client decides to make a change, it doesn't take us, it doesn't take that much effort to make the change. Well, the last thing that we want to do is we want to make a cast shadow of her. So to do that, what I need to do is I need to copy the model layer. So I'll go ahead and make a copy of it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave it on the top for the time being. And I'm going to change my foreground and background color back to the default. Black in the foreground, white in the background. And now to make a selection of her, what I simply do is hold down the Command key and click on the little icon of her. Now what I want to do is I want to fill that area with the foreground color. So easiest way to do that is to hold down the Option key and hit Delete. And that fills that selection with the foreground color, which we went back to black. So now what I'll do is I'm going to move, I'll deselect. I'm going to move it behind her. Okay, and now we want to distort it. So to do that, we need to go under Edit, and we need to go to Transform. And what we want to do is we want to skew it. And so now what I can do is I can take that and I'm going to move my mouse over the top little bar here, a little area, and I'm going to move it over, hold down the Shift key. Okay, so that it moves it directly to the left. And if I'm happy with that, click OK. And now what I want to do is I want to simply add transparency to it. So on her layer, which we can rename if you want to name it Shadow. And I'll name this one here Glasses. Okie doke. Let's make sure that the shadow is selected, and we'll change the opacity like so. So we get something that sort of matches what they have. And we have finished our lesson. That's it. We've done that in less than a half an hour. So the more recent iterations of Photoshop have made it very easy for us to isolate this woman from the background of the image that we're working from. That's the most important part of this. The Puppet Warp tool can be useful. It allows you to bend and warp and twist objects to conform them to your will if you want. It's not critical that her head is tilted back, but if it's something that you want to do without really distorting or messing up the image that much, rather than have to set her up for a new photo shoot again, you can do that quite easily in Photoshop now. That's been around for a little while. The other thing that we want to do is to colorize things from time to time. That was one of the first things that Photoshop and other digital editing programs were known for. Years and years and years ago, in the mid 80s, before Photoshop came to be, it was very expensive when they would, for example, photograph a car, and they had to hire a photographer in his studio and the number of people in his studio to photograph the car. And then later on, maybe the ad agency decided, or somebody in marketing decided that, you know what, we don't want that color anymore. We want to change it to something else. Well, in the past, they would have to hire a photo retoucher who would hand color all of this on a print or a negative, or but then when computers came to be, you could do it quite, much more easily and more realistically than what was done before. And then you don't have to hire the photographer to shoot it again, which could be quite costly. Now it's just used for all sorts of things. Okay, and it allows you to be a little bit more creative, to do things and to tweak and images to whatever your liking is. Okay, you're not stuck with what originally existed. You can always make changes. We can change the skin tone of her. We can change the color of her dress. We can do all sorts of things and change the color of her hair. You name it. We can do all sorts of things with the tools that we provided. That's why it's difficult today to discern the difference between an original and one that's been digitally altered. That's really, really hard. So that's pretty much it for today. We were able to do this without a lot of muss or fuss. Okay. Unless there are any questions about the assignment, about this lesson, we can call it a day. We're able to do this pretty quickly today and do a really nice job without too many mistakes or too many problems occurring. Any questions from any of you? Yes, no? About the assignment, about the lessons. I presume everybody has gotten in touch with me and has access to our shared Google Drive folder and knows how to navigate around Canvas and my website and that sort of thing. Oh, there is one more thing before we leave today, before I forget. I believe next Monday is a holiday. Labor Day is the 7th, which is a Tuesday, but I believe it's being celebrated or acknowledged, observed on Monday. So we will not meet on Monday. Okay, I'll probably use that time to do some grading and things like that. Okay. I only have one example of the postcard on my website, and I can show that to you. In recent iterations or recent semesters, I should say, I've switched. When we were meeting in person, I used the selfie photo bomb. I thought that was a little bit more fun and a little bit more challenging for students. But instead, I used the postcard for quite a while. And the one that I still have here is right here. So a couple of things about this. Let me go back. What I want you to do with this is I want to make sure it needs to be about 5 by 7 inches. That's all. You need to use a minimum of 4 images, combine 4 images together. The images can be photographs that you have taken. They can be photographs from magazines or books that you can photograph or scan. You can also get them off the internet, just to make sure that the images are a high enough resolution. And then you need to combine them together to create an interesting themed postcard. It can be vertical or horizontal. And I would also like you to incorporate text. This one involves some sort of satanic ritual thing. I don't think Henry was involved in any of that. He just thought it was amusing. And he found these images of hands raised, and he duplicated them again and again and again to create this crowd of hands raised, and the other images of the death with the scythe and other images. And then he used these other branches and changed their opacity and repeated them again and again. They're the same ones, just layered on top of one another again and again and again to create this kind of almost like a cathedral-like appearance of the forest. And then if you want, you can go back in and paint them, tint them, do what you want. The image can be, the final image can be black and white, as this one is, or it can be in color. It's up to you. I don't make that distinction anymore between one or the other, whichever. Sometimes with black and white images, they're a little bit more difficult. They seem easier, but especially when you use old images, you'll notice that there is a texture to the image. that you need to match. Make sure that the levels or the curves, or whatever you want to call it, the degree of lightness and darkness matches all, all of the images match one another. So they look like they're from the same photograph. And also pay attention to texture too. Sometimes you'll have to blur an image a little bit. Sometimes you'll have to. I can talk about that on another day if you like. To be able to make sure that they look like they're all from the same. That when they're put together, they look like it's done seamlessly. They look like they're done from this, taken from the same image. Okay. So that's the only one that I have. That's fun. Think of a theme. This one is unique. It can be serious. It can be humorous. It can be political. It can be, it can be, science fiction oriented. Maybe it's something, a space scene or something, or from Mars or whatever, and you combine images to be on Mars, find some good photographs of Mars or the moon or something. It can be anything. I don't want to say too much about it because I want it, you to have fun with it. Okay. So if there aren't any more questions, we'll call it a day. Okay. So we won't meet Monday, but we will meet Wednesday. If you have progress report on your, you want to show me examples of where you're going with your project, let me know. If not, then we'll wait, and I'll probably over the weekend put a due date on it. You'll have maybe 3 weeks to work on this, the postcard. All the while we will be doing more lessons. On Wednesday, we're going to go back. Now we'll go back to the quick fix lesson, which is lesson 5. Okie doke. So that's it. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye. You guys are free to leave. I will pause the recording, and after everybody has left, I'll end this and I will post the recording of it on my YouTube channel.